Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. Time for DC Spotlight for the week of February 13th, 2024. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Little surprised DC didn't put out their How to Lose a Guy Gardner in 10 Days this week instead of last week. But overall, I thought it was an okay week. No stinkers out there, really. Nothing really jumped out at me, but I don't know. What do you think of?
I enjoyed it. I actually, I think I might have enjoyed this week a little bit more than you. A lot of, if for no reason that there's a lot more interesting comic books out there than in weeks past, in my view. And I actually enjoyed reading the comics this week.
Yeah, so we'll chat about them. We're getting started a little a little late. The joys of podcasting. We're having some technical difficulties. So apologies last week. We know the sound quality wasn't up to our usual standards, as if we have standards, but yeah, hopefully we got all the bugs worked out. And we'll go ahead and kick it off with Sinister Sons, issue number 1. Been teased, been promoted, been a long time coming. We've seen some backups in the Green Lantern book from Jeremy Adams, but out in its own series now, 12 issue maxi series. Peter J. Tomasi is the writer. David LaFuente handles the art duties. Tamara Bonvillain on colors. Rob Lee on letters. I don't know that I expected to like this or didn't expect to like this. I'm not the biggest fan of Super Sons. I think it's okay. Part of that being that I'm just not a big Damien guy. Um, but I gotta say, I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this, and part of why I hadn't really been super excited about it, I'd say, is the art by David LaFuente that we got in those backups. Um, I just, we talked about it at the time. It felt sort of cartoony. It felt a little bit juvenile, and I didn't know how well that would suit, a book that I wanted to take a little more seriously, which is kind of an oxymoron anyway, right? Because it's focusing on kids, basically, preteens, 10, 11 years old. But then at the same time, they're supposed to be the sons of villains. They're supposed to be sinister, thus the title. So, yeah, it feels a little awkward. It feels a little wonky. For whatever reason, and I don't know if this is just me getting used to LaFuente's style in this story or if there was another reason, but I thought the art in this issue was fantastic. I thought it really worked. I thought the kids came across as sort of cartoony evil, like the way Wile E. Coyote comes across as the bad guy, or Yosemite Sam, or any other kind of Looney Tunes villain. You don't really expect them to tear people's heads off or shed blood or what have you, but they come across as bad guys, as the sons of their fathers, Sinestro and Zor-El, respectively. So this was fun, and just based on kind of the ego of these two kids, these two little kids, and their behavior, you kind of wonder how they could ever really be friends. Like they be friends the way Doctor Doom and Namor are friends, right? Like they never really trust each other, but they pal around. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, so to speak. Um, but yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, we've got the scene up on the screen there where they meet for the first time, and it's just, yeah, it's completely over the top and fun. And at the end of the day, I think that's what this is about, right? Peter J. Tomasi is just writing a book that's fun and not going to take itself too seriously. And I think for that reason, if I approach it from that kind of perspective, I think the LaFuente art does work. So maybe I was a little premature in judging it previously. So I don't know. What'd you think, Rocky?
I, uh, I'm still a little bit turned off by the art myself. I would like a more traditional house style. I wish it was more like Super Sons. I'm still not accustomed to the art, but I can't disagree with you on the story. I did find myself enjoying this story. Yeah, I did. It was, clearly they're both villainous, kids. They're juvenile delinquents and they're getting in trouble. Uh, what's a little bit odd to me is I think there's a mixture of there's a overlap or a conflicting tone, because I think the tone in the Kneel Before Zod series, which I know is a different series, but it's Lord Zod's parents, and we know that Lord Zod, and I won't give spoilers as to the rumors as to what might happen regarding over in the Kneel Before Zod series, but there's going to be a lot of serious happenings in Lord Zod's life, and this feels like a little bit sort of a wonky, sort of very zany, fun comic, which is at odds with the far more serious tone in Kneel Before Zod. And I, for that matter, for that reason, I wish this was a little bit more serious here. And maybe Peter Tomasi is going to make this more serious, but it's at odds with the art, which I look at this art and I just think it's very zany to me. To me, it's an odd variation of what you want to come across in the writing versus artistically what it looks like to me. I'm not saying I can't get used to it. It's just it is still a little bit jarring for me, but I have to say that Tomasi is winning me over with the story, and I kind of like the fact that these are two characters that are at odds. They're obviously going to start off not liking each other. They're both very they both want to be leaders. Lord Zod wants to rule this planet he comes across, and Sin Sun wants to basically be the mafia leader of this planet, and they're clearly at odds. Sin Sun actually steals the rocket ship that Lord Zod is in. It's kind of funny, so it's entertaining. It's entertaining, and so my criticism is me just getting over maybe the overlap with Kneel Before Zod. But quite frankly, I can see myself getting accustomed to this story, and this I think this is a lot of fun. I think those people that are fans of Super Sons will probably enjoy this.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the art. It's kind of zany, and yeah, you're completely right. If it was a little more of a house style, it would be more in keeping with what we've seen in Kneel Before Zod. So yeah, it doesn't, and that's not the first time DC's had this issue. Even recently, right? Like we talked about how the tone in Batman and Robin from the first issue was so wildly different than the tone that we were getting in um, the Batman versus Catwoman storyline, Gotham, where it was, and they were taking place at the same time. Just didn't make any sense. I guess don't think about it too hard, and just enjoy the comic for what it is. Okay, up next we have Blue Beetle #6. This is written by Josh Trujillo. Adriana Gutierrez is the artist. Will Quintana on colors. Lucas Catoni on letters. I'm liking what's happening here in terms of us getting some more background into the Javier Basalado, I guess is how you would say it. Basaldo.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, who's basically the bearer of the blood scarab. Um, and I really appreciated that. It was interesting to see sort of the parallels and the differences between him and Jaime Reyes in terms of sort of being possessed in a way by these scarabs and them sort of having to be bent to the will of the scarab. Obviously, Jaime's is a little more of an independent relationship. Javier apparently is basically remote controlled by this blood scarab, and his personality is sort of subsumed by it. So that was an interesting idea, made this blood scarab character much more than a two-dimensional villain. So curious to see where that's going to lead. The only thing I'm not liking about Blue Beetle, I've talked about this before, as opposed to the first series where I felt like Gutierrez's art was really clean, this art feels like it's getting messier and messier as it goes along. I don't know if that's just a, a byproduct of him trying to stay on schedule, because I also noticed that the backgrounds in this issue were very, very light. Oftentimes there were no backgrounds, just solid colors. But there's, again, that constant ink splash over every page, and it just makes it feel dirty and messy, and I'm just not a fan of it. I don't like, just the art in this book would be, the visuals in this book, I should say, would be greatly improved. Just take away the black ink spatter. Just take it away. Just remove it. Because it's not like these guys are working in, on actual Bristol boards. This is all being done digitally. So they're adding another layer where it's just ink splatter. And I question whether or not that's a good idea. I also question what, like, don't get me wrong, people do it in real life, right? Like you get your brush and you kind of flick the bristles or whatever, but you have to be really careful that it doesn't go and cover something that's, really important or what have you. But it's so much easier to do it digitally. So it's almost like people are like, well, it's so easy to do. Why don't I just do it? And it adds this like grittiness to the art. It just makes it look messy in my mind, and it's just not necessary. It's just not necessary. It doesn't work for me, and I don't I don't like it. I mean, I've said that 100 times, but nobody cares what I think, I guess, when it comes to the artist. But anyway, what do you think of the story?
I actually didn't mind the story. I thought the story was a little bit. It caught me by surprise a little bit because one of the internal struggles that Jaime Reyes has was whether or not to use lethal force, and he goes out of his way to not use lethal force in this issue. Unfortunately, he comes across an unsurmountable obstacle. The Keja do. I'm saying that wrong, but the actual suit that Blue Beetle has a mind, actually takes over and has a mind of its own, and actually ends up utilizing what appears to be lethal force against the Blood Scarab. And it's really tragic because in the midst of their fight, it becomes clear that the Blood Scarab is actually taking control of Javier, the I guess the innocent human who has had his mind overwhelmed by the forces of by the psychic presence of the Blood Scarab. Which is the ancient pharaoh of Egypt, and so it's sort of tragic in that respect. And yeah, so I thought it worked kind of well. Because I wasn't aware, and this might be new, but there's actually now a conflict between who controls the suit. I mean, the Blue Beetle was so concerned about potentially Jaime Reyes dying that the Beetle suit itself took control because it didn't trust Jaime Reyes's instincts, and didn't believe that lethal force could be avoided. And that's very interesting there, and also very tragic because it shows a disconnect between the suit and its communication with Jaime. So that's very interesting. I agree with you with the art. I'll be very blunt. There are entire sequences here where I'll be honest. I'm on a page right now where I don't know what the hell happened. There is a page where the Green Beetle, whose name I forget, I don't know what's happening. There's a glowing ball behind her. I don't know why. I don't know what's happening. I literally don't know. I don't know what's happening on the page. It's not being described what's happening. There are battle sequences where I don't know what happened and who the characters are. And there's the color work I think is wonky. I think they got the color work of Starfire wrong. It didn't quite feel like Starfire's traditional sort of colors. It might sound like I'm being picky here, and I am being picky, but it didn't work for me. This battle sequence, this could have been done better. I don't mind the splash, like the blood splash or the blotchiness that bothers you. That's not. I can get over that. In fact, it even gives the illusion of blood, the blotchiness, and I think it arguably even enhances some of the scenes. Unlike you, it feels very different. To me, it's just the overall colors just don't seem to mix well. Although I will say, colorist Will Quintana has his work cut out for him, because when you're dealing with all these colors of Beatles and everything else, and they're battling amongst each other, I can understand that he's challenged by it. But it wasn't quite up to task for me. So, but nonetheless, from a story perspective, overall, I was pleased with this, and I like the moral struggle that Jaime was left with, and particular his failure at the end to control the suit, the Blue Beetle suit, and unfortunately, the lethal force that was used at the end of this. There's a tragedy to this that Jaime Reyes. It's probably going to stay with the character for quite some time. So I thought it was well written, despite maybe some hiccups on the art.
Be interesting to see what fallout there might be from this, because you're right, that was, I mean, Kaji Da and Jaime have always gotten along, and to have Kaji just take over, and again, it just drawing those parallels between him and Javier, very, very interesting. Great work by Josh Trujillo. And I know, again, I think Gutierrez it's probably just a time thing. Like he doesn't have time to put in backgrounds, because he's trying to stay on schedule, and so he's looking to add texture and layer in some way, and it's probably real easy just to use that ink splatter. But yeah, I don't think it works as well as maybe it could. All right, up next we have Batman and Robin #6. This is from writer Joshua Williamson. Nicola Semegia handles the art. Rex Locus on colors. Steve Wands on letters. Interesting story here. Kind of follows up with what we saw last issue, where at the end, this kid who's on Damien's soccer team, Zach, there was some hints given that he was Mr. Zaz's son. You're like, what? How can that be? What sort of retcon is going on now? Don't worry, everybody. Nobody was crazy enough to sleep with Mr. Zaz and have his kid. It turns out what it had. This kid's had it rough. You almost feel bad for him, as much as he's been kind of a jerk. And somebody's trained him to be a very potent fighter and deadly assassin, and of course, Damien thinks it's Shush, or what was her name, Mistress Payne, or whatever, the same woman that
Yeah, Mistress Harsh.
Mistress Harsh. There it is. The same woman that trained him, back in the day when he was training to be a League of Assassins. But what happened was Mr. Zaz killed this kid's parents. And this kid kind of lost it. He had a psychotic break, and he convinced himself in his mind that the only reason that Mr. Zaz would kill his parents is because Mr. Zaz loved the kid so much that he wanted the kid for himself. He wanted the kid to be his son. He wanted Zach to be his son. So that's how Zach sort of dealt with the trauma of Mr. Zaz murdering his parents. Like, super tragic, like really, really pretty heavy stuff from Joshua Williamson. So I did appreciate that this story didn't drag on too long in terms of the idea of Mr. Zaz having a son. But we're still exploring the mystery of, is Principal Stone Mistress Harsh? Is she this woman that trained Damien back in the day? I guess we'll have to wait and see. So that's still being explored. There's also at the end a very sort of tender moment between Bruce and Damien that I thought, again, was handled really, really well. I mentioned just a few minutes ago about kind of the uneven tone when you talk about Batman and Robin, and how Bruce and Damien from the first issue were sort of seemed like they were in a good place relationship wise, which was at odds with what we were seeing in Batman, Catwoman, Gotham War, what have you. I'm fine with just being like, okay, that's whatever it was. Gotham War didn't really work for either of us. But what is working is Williamson's emotional exploration of the relationship between father and son. Like, they've never felt more like father and son to me than in this issue. There have been moments here or there, but this is definitely up there with them. Too many times, especially granted, I haven't read all the Grant Morrison run, but what I have read of it, so often it felt like two coworkers who didn't even really like each other. The way they would speak to each other, just only saying what was absolutely necessary. There was like a barrier or a standoffishness between them, a coldness. And you don't feel that at all. You feel actually like the warmth of a father and son relationship. I really like that. It's softening Damien up a little bit, and softening Bruce up for that matter. And I think these characters need that, Damien needs it because too often he comes across as a petulant jerk, and Batman needs it because he comes off too often, especially in recent years. We've talked so often about the power creep of Batman as this like cold, inhuman, crime fighting monster machine guy who doesn't really care about anything other than fighting crime. And it makes him feel like a very two-dimensional character. This is adding some emotional depth to the character. Now, whether that will carry over at all to when they're wearing their costumes, we'll have to wait and see. Or whether it'll carry beyond the pages of this series, we'll have to wait and see. But I've been pleasantly surprised by the last couple issues of Batman and Robin. And also the Nicholas Semeggia art. Like, when I think of Semeggia, I go back and I think about that Future State Gotham title and how heavily manga influenced it was, with really heavy line weights, and it was black and white, and it just what did we say? I mean, it wasn't quite to the level of Milos Giannanis, where we felt like his artwork looked like it came out of the Doug cartoon. But Semeggia was sort of in that realm. I don't know if he's purposely trying to use, more of a traditional superhero style, but I was pretty impressed with the art here as well. I thought the art worked really, really well. I really liked his choices too, with camera angles and varying foreground and background and that sort of thing. So yeah, I was really impressed. I think this is probably my favorite issue of the series so far. What do you think, Rocky?
Wow. Yeah, and you never even mentioned the surprise ending. It was great to see Flatline show up,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
so that's why I enjoyed it, because Flatline was one of my favorite characters from the Robin series that Williamson did such a good job on, in terms of when they were had that fighting tournament. And I guess technically, I mean, I think they're still boyfriend and girlfriend. I don't think they technically broke up, but I liked it. I like the character work. I don't need to repeat again what you said. There's good character work between Bruce and Damien. Nice to see Bruce. I mean, Damien actually is a talented artist. He's he's a decent comic book artist. And he I guess his Damien prefers manga over American style comic books too. I mean, apparently he's not alone. But in any event, we can blame Damien for the lack of sales in comic books if that's what's happening, and maybe that's happening in the DC universe as well. I don't know, but in any event, I thought it was well done. The story between Victor Zsasz being the sort of he obviously wasn't the father of young Zachary, but he being the jerk that he is, he he made it worse. And per young Zach is probably a future inmate at Arkham Asylum because of it. Mistress Harsh, we're still left with that mystery at the end. Is in fact Mistress Harsh, or pardon me, is Principal Stone Mistress Harsh, and we don't know. But more specifically, even if Principal Stone is Mistress Harsh, so what? She hasn't appeared to have done anything wrong yet, even if she is, which is interesting because maybe she's on a path of redemption and she just wants to, she enjoys being an ordinary high school principal as opposed to, a mistress working for Talia al Ghul, which probably has a shelf life of only a couple weeks. So it was actually, it's interesting. I like what Williamson is doing here. He's actually slowly building a story. And I think he's doing a decent enough job of it. And this is definitely one of the better issues since this series began. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely in agreement there. So let's move on. Next up, we have Outsiders #4. It's written by Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly, Robert Carey on art, Valentina Taddeo on colors, Tom Napolitano on letters. It's been a little bit of an up and down series for us. I think you've struggled with comparisons to the Authority, which obviously it's harkening back to to some extent. So yeah, this was, again, I thought a really, really strong issue. I'll let you talk about the story first. What do you think?
I I actually think that this should have been either the first issue or the second issue. The first issue sort of introduced us the idea that the planetary concept is back, but in the context of the DC universe. What I enjoyed about this fourth issue, and I think arguably this is actually a nice one-shot issue, and it introduces us to a character called Jenny Crisis. Now, Jenny Jenny Crisis is the new spirit of the 21st century. Now, for fans of the Authority and fans of the Authority in particular, Jenny Sparks was the spirit of the 20th century. And then following that, a character by the name of Jenny Quantum was the spirit of the 21st century. Now, we don't know what happened with Jenny Quantum, but Jenny Quantum has been replaced by Jenny Crisis, the spirit of the 21st century. So in the context of the DC universe, a spirit of every century, at the strike of midnight at the beginning of every century babies are born, and one of them becomes the spirit of that century, essentially embodying all of the aspects and culture and technological developments of that particular century. And these the spirit is very, very powerful. Now, what's interesting about what Kelly and Lansing do here is they make Jenny Crisis. They imbue her with I don't know. She's got flaws of character, but for the most part, she's kind of an aimless wanderer. And whenever she's got a lot of mood swings, and when she has a mood swing and she has a bad day, the world has a bad day. When she's happy, the world is happy. And I don't know how I got mixed feelings about that, because my recollection of Jenny Sparks and even Jenny Quantum is they were a reflection of the world, not the other way around. Like, if the world was having a bad day, that's a reflection that reflected on Jenny Sparks or Jenny Quantum. But this is the other way around, where now Jenny Crisis, and what a perfect name! I love the name Jenny Crisis, because if you're a DC fan, you're all good for a good crisis. And so now that it does bother me a little bit that at the end here, the Outsiders, Batwoman and the drummer and essentially Batwing, they go on the hunt. They want to recruit Jenny Crisis to be part of their team, but they're also concerned that they have to apprehend her because she's a potential danger. And the only thing that doesn't quite make sense to me is the entire issue establishes that Jenny Crisis is a mess. She's moody when she has a bad day or she has a bad relationship. I don't know, her sexuality is probably open-ended, but in this particular issue, she falls in love with another woman. And this woman breaks up with her, and because of her heartache, the world, it's implied that a lot of people around the world died because of all these storms and all these terrible things that happen in the world because Jenny Crisis has a bad day. And yet at the end, the drummer concludes without much evidence that Jenny Crisis is an okay person and kind of lets her go. And Batwing says, "Can we have your email so we can contact you whenever we need you to join our team?" And it's sort of left like that. So I'm a little bit concerned how nonchalant they were about it. I mean, this is kind of a. I mean, I'm not sure if I would be comfortable just letting this woman who's essentially directionless and not particularly prone to making great decisions, sort of be on her own. But beyond that, I love the potential of this Jenny Crisis. She's a new character, interesting. This is the best issue I think so far, and the most straightforward, and it tells a decent story. And I want to see more of Jenny Crisis. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I get it. Very meta, in terms of talking about the generation that's, currently coming of age and all the sort of the pushback. It's interesting, right? Like there's a couple of generations in between, generation, the forgotten generation that we're a part of, Generation X or whatever. Then you have Generation Z, then you have millennials. And before our generation, you had kind of the baby boomers, and it's interesting because you have the boomers, and then you have the millennials, and they're the ones that really are kind of at odds with each other because the boomers will talk about, well, how come you can't do things the way we did? We went to college, we bought houses, we raised families. Here you guys are in your late 30s or entering your 30s or what have you, and you're still living at home with your parents, and why don't you go get a job and blah blah blah. And there's a disconnect there. They just don't understand that the economy and the way the system is set up just isn't the way that it used to be back then. It's not as easy to do things the way that it used to be in terms of housing's more expensive, and it's just a different world now. And so I find that to be fascinating. And in a lot of ways, that's what this Jenny Crisis is representing, right? Like the difference, the trauma that the youth of today is having to deal with, and what have you. So yeah, it's kind of interesting in a lot of ways. And I think Jenny Crisis is an interesting character. Like you mentioned, there are still some issues with her. I think, like you mentioned, there's some issues with letting her run free. But at the same time, it's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? She's supposed to be the embodiment of the new century, born at the moment the new century started. And yet she has this, crippling anxiety when she was young. She couldn't really go outside or be around other people at all. It's like, what is that? Um, so yeah, interesting the choices that she's being forced to make. And while I agree with you, the outsider's like, how can you let this woman she's such a danger to the entire planet. How can you just let her be out there on her own? Like, well, what other choice do they have really? Like you're sort of damned if you
Right.
do and damned if you don't. If you try to capture her, you try to force her to do what she doesn't want to do. I mean, what do you just put a bullet in her head? Like, we don't even know. I mean, she's so powerful. We don't even know if that would even really work. So again, really interesting story, really interesting character for Lansing and Kelly to introduce here because there's so much potential for what she can be as a character. And yeah, so from that perspective, I really enjoyed it. All right. Up next, we have Batman City of Madness #3. This is written and drawn by Christian Ward, letters by Hassan Otsman Elha. Black Label series exploring what do they call it? The Gotham from below. I really got some vibes of the Batman who laughs and what have you in this. If even though that character and Scott Snyder's story about that character, I feel like hasn't been around that long. It's almost like this is homaging that already. So that was interesting. But anyway, what did you think of this?
I thought that what's interesting about this is that this has the vibe to me of having almost this is actually another origin for the Joker. Now, this is a Black Label series, and this isn't. I'm assuming that this isn't mainstream DCU because this ends implying that I mean, essentially, the Batman. Let's put it this way: Gotham City is above. Gotham above is different than Gotham below because Gotham below has copies of all the citizens of Gotham above, and uh, the son of Amadeus Arkham is Arthur Arkham, and a copy of Arthur Arkham is in Gotham Below, and he is the um, uh, this copy of Arthur Arkham in Gotham Below finds himself. It's implied that he eventually he survives the killing of all the villains in the Gotham Below, and essentially lives on to become the Joker in Gotham Above. That's the implication in the ending, or it's hinted that that's a possibility, which I thought was very interesting. It sort of links that Amadeus Arkham has a beautiful wife and one daughter, and he's got one son named Arthur Arkham. Arthur Arkham witnesses the horrible killing of his wife and the horrible killing of his mother and his sister. And Dr. Arkham, Amadeus Arkham, tries to cure his son Arthur, but he makes a deal with the occult and with devilish forces, and devilish forces create a copy of Arthur that and Arthur, the real Arthur, of course, gets dragged down to the Gotham Below, where he becomes this Batman below, the Batman from below, and then the opposite of Batman, the copy of Arthur Arkham becomes the Joker of Gotham Above. That's how I read it. So it's interesting, and it shows how Dr. Arkham took revenge on the serial killer that killed his wife and daughter by electrocuting him. And all of the copies of Batman's enemies were killed by the real Arthur Arkham, who became the Batman from below. He killed all of them. And the last one to die was actually Two-Face, who ended up betraying all the other villains of the Gotham Below and helping out Batman, our Batman who's down there. And I thought it was well done. I was surprised that it ended as it did, but I thought it was well done. I thought it was uh, of all the potential origins of the Joker, because this is a potential origin of the Joker. That isn't it interesting that essentially a copy of the son, or a copy of the son of Amadeus Arkham from Gotham Below, ultimately ends up becoming the Joker. I mean, it's Christian Ward is definitely he's thinking outside the box here. I give him credit. It's a self-contained story. I think it's good. I think it's interesting. I like the final fate of all the villains of the Gotham Below. I like it. It's even suggested that the Court of Owls in mainstream Gotham are essentially the Court of Owls that they came up from the Gotham Below because they wanted to gain more power, and they wanted to come up above to Gotham Above because they feel they would have more power to shape reality and shape the city. I thought it was really well done, and I just again, I thought it was eerie. I thought it was creepy. I thought it was an interesting alternative uh, description of a potential origin of the Joker at the end, and the fact that the part that interested me the least was this new Robin character, this new sidekick for the Batman Below, this young black kid whose father was who he's from Smallville and his father was killed in Gotham, and he's seeking revenge. Batman ultimately prevents this kid from taking a life and being the permanent sidekick of the Batman Below, but that was the least interesting aspect of the story as far as I was concerned, but it was still interesting enough, and I thought it was well done. I got to give full props to Christian Ward. I thought this was really good, and the ending took me by surprise, and I quite enjoyed it. So, what do you think?
Yeah, the artwork is fantastic. That's what you come to expect from Christian Ward. It's esoteric. It's interesting. It definitely suited this sort of horror story that he told with the Gotham Below. The idea that Arkham's son could be the Joker, or in some way have influenced the Joker, or in some parts of the DC multiverse could be the Joker, is very interesting. There's also hints that the Court of Owls may have originated originally from the Gotham Below. I like that idea as well, because it is sort of this twisted, mirror image of what Gotham is. We always know Gotham's had very much had its high society people that felt like they were kind of above others. And so, if you're talking about a mirror image of that definitely could be the Court of the Owls, where you had people that felt like they were the have-nots of the world, and what would they envy? Well, they would envy the people that the haves, and they would want to emulate that in some way. but still at the end of the day being evil. So yeah, I really appreciated that. I thought this was a fantastic story. I can understand why that Robin, this new Robin, exists in terms of needing an excuse, needing a plot device to get Bruce to go to the Gotham Below to become aware of it. But yeah, it is a little clunky at times and doesn't really work that well. Um, but what does work is Bruce recognizing the trauma and trying to get through to Arthur, and Arthur ultimately being at the mercy of this entity, um, this evil entity that both Gotham Above and Gotham Below are sort of at the mercy of at times. So yeah, fantastic story. Definitely something that Christian Ward or another writer could go back to, and yeah, lots of hints to be explored with the connection of Arthur Arkham and the Joker, as well as the Gotham Below and the Court of Owls themselves. Okay, up next we have Wesley Dodds, the Sandman, issue number 5. Robert Venditti, writer, Riley Rosmo on art, colors by Yvonne Placencia, letters by Tom Napolitano. Little bit of a transitional issue, but there's still plenty of action. So we know that what's his name, Vanderlyle was attacked last issue. Wesley Dodds showed up there just in time, was able to stop the attack, and then in questioning Vanderlyle, Wesley Dodds comes to the realization that it was the colonel that he went and did his presentation to early on in the series, and talked about having non-lethal warfare using his different sleeping gases and what have you. And so he takes it upon himself to go to the army base, and he kidnaps this colonel to try to find out who's got his book, who's calling the strings, who's behind it. And lo and behold, as we suspected, and then Venditti tried to throw us off, it appears that Vanderlyle is behind it after all. So
he didn't fool us.
Yeah. Didn't fool us, but we don't know why. We don't know what the motivations are. Vanderlyle having been a friend of Wesley Dodds' father, is it just about the money? I sort of think that's what it'll be. Again, just putting on my fortune teller hat and trying to figure it out. This was a time where fortunes, old money was had been lost in the Great Depression a decade earlier, and times were changing, and people just didn't have that old world wealth that they used to have. And so maybe this is just that. Maybe this is just Vanderlyle wanting to steal that that book of Wesley Dodds that has all his formulas or what have you, and turn it over to the army and get a payday. Or maybe it's something more sinister than that. But either way, the tone and the feel and the action of this series have been very consistent throughout. I continue to be impressed with Riley Rosmo's art. I don't know if it's just that I've gotten used to it. He's gotten better, maybe a combination of the two. But once again, the art is just fantastic. Like even things as simple as the way that he draws the fear gas. It almost looks like a snake weaving around, going in people's nostrils and what have you. And great colors by Yvonne Placencia as well, giving it sort of a feel of the 1940s. Feels very authentically 1940s. So that's really working for me as well. So anyway, what did you think, Rocky?
I thought it was very well. First, I want to give a double your comments on the art by Riley Rosmo, uh, because I mean there's sequences here where there's pages 10 through 14 where Sandman shows up and he's being attacked. He's surrounded by gas. It looks absolutely amazing. And as the bullets start to fly, the panels, the Riley Rosmo is just masterful how he deviates from the standard square panels, and he creatively displaces them all on the page in a way that heightens the mood, heightens the action, and it's just amazing. And as the pages progress from pages, I think it's 10 through 14, you can see you can see the chaos, you can see the panels with the bullets flying, the bottles, and the facial expressions, and showing an eyeball and the gritted teeth, and all all leading to a page where Breckenridge is running. He's running away. He's got one arm, and you got bam, 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 and the giant bold letters are actually the panels themselves showing Breckenridge being shooting and being shot at. It's extremely well done, and it's that level of creativity that heightens this story. That, you know, with all great respect to Venditti, I like the story. We guessed it. It wasn't exactly the most compelling mystery of all, but it nonetheless, it was heightened by fantastic art, and I feel rewarded. Not that it was that difficult to figure out what was going on, but I feel rewarded for figuring out the story ahead of time, and just the visuals are just fantastic. So all in all, just very well done, and I'm so glad that I'm so glad I stuck with the series. And a shout out to Riley Rosmo, because I want to give him a shout out, because I've been very hard on him in the past on his art, but he's found his niche with this series. He's done an excellent job, and he deserves to be called out for it. You're on mute. Sorry about you're on mute.
Yep, sorry about that. Yeah, I echo that. We've been hard on Riley at times. His art is just so stylized. I mean, I was the first one to admit that his art worked perfectly on that Martian Manhunter series, because, you know, Martian Manhunter is a shape changer and what have you. But other times we haven't liked it on Harley Quinn and some other things. But yeah, it's just working here really, really well. So again, just props to Riley for doing a fantastic job. So. All right. Up next, we have Batman number 143. This is written by Chip Zdarsky. We have art by Giuseppe Camuncoli and Andrea Sorrentini. Colors by, hold on, let me get to the credits page. Apologies. So I didn't really care for the first issue of this arc. So the second issue surprised me. Because it started to pull me in. So I was really surprised, pleasantly so. But we'll talk about that in detail in a second. Let me just, if I can find the stupid credits. Of course, it's going to be on the last page, if at all. Are the credits here at all? Or page 30 something? Okay, here we go. Finally. Yeah, Chip Zdarsky writer, Giuseppe Camuncoli and Andrea Sorrentini on pencils. Stefano Nessi and Sorrentino on inks, Sanchez and Dave Stewart, Alejandro Sanchez and Dave Stewart on colors, and then Clayton Cowell on letters. Yeah, I was, as I said, really impressed with this. As much as I'm not a fan of the Joker, and this is, you know, the Joker sort of origin story, if you will, you know, not in terms of, okay, Ace chemicals, he falls in a vat of chemicals, it bleaches his skin, it turns his hair green, it drives him even further insane. But in terms of what happened next? That was sort of point A, right? Like, yeah, everything that happened to Ace chemicals, and then you talk about point C, let's call it, and that's when you have that first story, the one that Tom King and Mitch Gerrard's just homaged in Batman Brave and the Bold, where Batman and the Joker meet up for the first time. And I think what we're seeing here with what Zdarsky is building is, it wasn't just he fell in the acid and then that was his final iteration. There was a bit of an evolution. There was a bit of an adjustment period for the Joker to come to terms with who he was and sort of figure out what he wanted to do. And that, it seems like that's what this story is exploring. Now, you know, you mentioned it last time that some people may not like this, and I could see it being polarizing. But what's interesting is, so just when you think Zdarsky's answering the question, then he inserts some doubt. Well, is this really what's happening? Was the Joker really afraid of Batman, or was he never afraid? Was he just trying to manipulate events? So that's pretty interesting as well. The other thing that's interesting that we've talked about is this idea of this doctor. I can't remember what his name is.
Captio.
Captio. And he's the one that trained Bruce to kind of control his fear and train his mind to be Batman. And they didn't part on good terms. Him and Bruce Wayne did not part on good terms. And apparently this guy holds a grudge, like maybe the biggest grudge of all time, because he goes and seeks out the Joker. He's like, yeah, Bruce Wayne may be the most brilliant mind that I ever encountered until this Joker. And I'm going to help this Joker, become something that's going to be more brilliant than Bruce Wayne, that's going to have the ability to destroy Bruce Wayne. Like, dude, what a grudge. What a jerk you are. Um, but again, some people may not like that they're tying the this idea of who the Joker is so closely to who Batman is, to the point they're being trained by the same people. I can sort of understand that, but at the same time, you hear a lot of people talk about how the Batman and the Joker are kind of opposite sides of the same coin. So why wouldn't you have that parallel of so many ways that they're similar? But at the same time, I get it, right? Like, you're asking us to believe a hell of a lot of coincidences, but maybe that's just how the DC universe works. So it's still, at the end of the day, is a Joker story. So I still kind of groan when I'm like, here we go. But I was entertained by this. And I've only talked about the flashback. The story that's happening in present time is even more interesting to me. This idea that the Joker finally succeeded. In a way, it almost feels like the last Batman Joker story. I know we had whatever it was, Batman Last Night by Snyder and Capullo, but this truly feels like the last Batman story, to the point where we see Selina Kyle, and she gets subjected to whatever the Joker has going on, something to do with sound waves that's turning everybody into Jokers. She had rounded up the rest of the Bat family after they'd been Jokerized. And this is a Batman that's clearly older and has lost a step. So how does he win the day when the Joker seems just as powerful as ever? I guess that's what we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, fantastic, the story that's taking place in present day. And I imagine, although other than obviously they both have Batman and the Joker, there haven't been too many tie-ins yet. But I imagine by the time we get to the end of these parallel stories, that we'll see how they tie together a lot more closely than it appears at this point. So yeah, I mean, as much as I didn't like 142, this was a vast improvement. And yeah, I actually found myself enjoying this. Don't tell anybody. I've got to keep my Joker rants, close to hand when needed. But I got to imagine, Rocky, you enjoyed 142 immensely. This probably was even better in your mind. What'd you think?
I did enjoy this. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite well. I mean, initially I had mixed feelings about it. I'm a little bit confused as by this future story that where the future Joker, it might be the last Joker story, where the Joker is spreading a virus that is spread through laughter, through audio waves, and he's infected the entire Batman family, and that's someplace in the future. How does that relate? How does that relate to the origin of the Joker between Dr. Captia, who trained both Bruce Wayne in order to avoid fear and in order to access multiple personalities, because Batman created the persona of Zur-En-Arrh because of the training he got from Dr. Captia, and it's implied that the three Jokers, are three different psychological manifestations of the Joker, directly as a result of his training with Dr. Captia as well. So that's interesting. How does that relate to? We got to remember that 2 issues ago, the Joker and Bruce Wayne are trapped together in a cell, and they're the captives of failsafe. And the Joker and Batman. One of the questions Batman asked the Jokers: How did you know? How do you know about Zur? And how do you know about these other people? How do you know what you know? And so this might be the Joker sort of telling Bruce Wayne the story, his origin. So Batman, this might be the first time that this is a story, even though the narration here is Dr. Capia. A lot of the narration is by Dr. Capia. We're privy to Dr. Capia's thoughts, who, as he lay dying at the end, killed by the Joker, he's almost bragging to himself. He's so narcissistic. Even as he's dying, killed by the Joker, he calls the Joker perfect. I created the perfect weapon. Could he have fooled me all this time? He's the perfect weapon of chaos. And he's so impressed with himself. And he says, "Look out, Bruce. He's coming for you now." And so you got to wonder now. What I find exciting about this is a number of things. First is that this origin of the Joker, whether you think the Joker was playing Dr. Caprio for a fool and just wanted to get training from him and was using him or not, you can still sort of reconcile this with the three Jokers. You can even reconcile this with Tom King's Batman Year One story. You can even reconcile this with the Killing Joke, if you really think about it. Because it's not inconsistent or necessarily incompatible with any of the past iterations or origins of the Joker. With a little bit of creative headcanon, you can fit it in. it might be a little messy, but you can fit it in. And frankly, with DC continuity being as convoluted as it is, because it is a lot of history there of this, especially the Joker, I think that's. I want to give Zardasky some props because I think this actually works here, and I actually like it. So I'm going to be really curious to know. I mean, I know that you don't seem to mind it. Be curious to know what the larger comic reading public thinks of this story as well. I actually quite enjoy it. I think it was a pretty good job here. Dr. Captia wants to cure the Joker. He wants to expand the Joker's mind, and boy, did he succeed in doing that. Now, but how does this relate to the future? What's going to happen now that Bruce Wayne, Batman, and the Joker both realize, now that Bruce Wayne knows that both he and the Joker were trained by Dr. Captia, and they're both trapped and held captive by Failsafe, and one of Batman's psychological inner profiles, Zuranat, is now in Failsafe's body. What are Joker and Batman going to do as a team to defeat Failsafe? Are they going to work together? I don't know. This origin of the Batman's not even over yet. And what does this future story have to do with this main story? I'm not really sure. The Commissioner Gordon story is pretty good too. And all in all, if I have one criticism of Zardasky's story here is that he's weaving together a lot of moving parts. I don't think he did a very good job at all of. He should have. I don't even think Dr. Captio's name is mentioned in either this issue or the previous issue. That's a significant miss. I think for new readers, you're going to have to read. You have to read Batman the Knight, issue 8, where Dr. Captio is in to fully get this. So I think that I think some homework is going to be necessary for new readers. If DC's going to collect this as a trade, they're going to have to throw in that issue of Dr. Capia, issue 8 of the Knight, I think. But maybe some will disagree with me on that. But so I think that probably in putting this together, the story is good, but I think for new readers, it might be a little bit more difficult to catch on to. But I hope I'm wrong. But I'm enjoying it, but I'm a longtime reader, and I just had a lot of fun with this. So, yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, again, I thought I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised how much I was pulled in by a freaking Joker story. So, all right, up next we have Speed Force number 4. This is written by Jarrett Williams, art by Danielle Di Niculo, colors by Andrew Dahlhaus, letters by Simon Bolin. What do you think of this?
All right, you're gonna. Okay. This was basic. I mentioned earlier that I might have a rant, and this was going to be the issue where I ranted a little bit. I'm going to. I actually had some extra time today, this afternoon, and I thought just for shits and giggles, I would read this until I actually understood, and until I could actually ascertain some discernible plot. And I think I kind of sort of got a discernible plot here. We got this character, the fiddler, called Fiddles, and he's citing he's working with the Music Meister in order to manipulate an app called the Symphony app, which is a music app to get subscribers onto it, and they want to brainwash people who use the Symphony app. So it would be like if all of us downloaded Spotify and Spotify was an app that could brainwash us. This is what Fiddles and this Music Meister mod want to do, and they want to overthrow this other music mogul called Sebastian Stagg, who's got a robotic companion called Stagatron. And somehow this is linked to a bunch of missing scientists that were kidnapped or disappeared in issue 1. I'm not sure why. And there is a slew of new characters that just pop up here that were new. I mean, including Fiddles, and then there was this Isaac character and Maud and Dragon's Son. And my criticism of this series is that while I'm trying to figure out the plot is drowned out in the writer's attempt. And forgive me, the writer is Williams.
Jarrett Williams.
Yeah, Jarrett Williams. Jarrett Williams spends so much time. There's so much exposition here, way too much exposition, and the exposition, there's not enough exposition explaining what's going on plot wise. And instead, we got pages where Wallace West is angsting about feeling bad about not asking for help when he needs it, and then Avery getting upset that she feels that she's better than she is because she's better than this, and she's upset with Wallace because Wallace didn't ask for help, and there's a very vain attempt at character work that fails. It doesn't work because I can't get into the character work because I'm struggling. It needs to be grounded in a plot, and I found myself in my struggle to understand what was going on and why are these characters here? Why are there so many characters on the page? They're superfluous, they're unnecessary. Just tell me what the plot is, first of all, before I can get grounded on the characters. We don't know Wallace West enough or Avery enough. They don't have an established friendship until really this series to begin with, quite frankly, other than a couple of minor appearances. So I don't feel that they know each other well enough anyway. The sequence where they're battling Superboy, Superboy's costume is, or Connor Kent's costume is different. That looked wonky. I think he's over. I think his mind was overtaken last issue by this music app of a symphony of some kind. It brainwashed him. So I kind of get that. I think the art was a little bit too stylistic for me, but the art I could get used to, but the the plot was just there's too many words on this page. Jarrett Williams does he tries so hard making all these characters sound natural. You can see his attempt in there's so much dialogue here. He tries to give each character their own voice with slang and everything else, but it just confused me. It conglomerated to such and built up to a point where I just felt each panel was almost disconnected to it wasn't unified by a common thread in my mind, and I personally felt overwhelmed reading it. And I think it's almost like he takes a simple concept of a plot and didn't really address it, and then just bombarded the reader with dialogue that doesn't serve any larger narrative that I could find. I was very frustrated with this. I'm being as diplomatic as I can. I think there's a good story here, but I think it's just lost in the verboseness of it all. So, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Lost in the verboseness of it all. Yeah, I think like this would work better in my mind if we knew for sure. Okay, this is a story that is not in regular continuity, right? Because you talk about an attempt at characterization and it failing. Well, we've seen these aren't characters. There's a lot of characters, and some are new, but most of them are characters we've seen before. We're seeing Roundhouse, we're seeing Mister Terrific, we're seeing Wallace West, we're seeing Avery, the Flash of China, what have you. These are characters that we've seen before, and we sort of know what to expect from them. I mean, they're not fully fleshed out, major characters where we know exactly how they would act or have a good idea, but a baseline has been established with these characters, especially with Wallace West. And he acts so wildly out of character here with this angst and worrying about things and what have you. And it's like, this is not nowhere near it's not the same character that other people have been writing about. So there's sort of that disconnect. And then the other part of it, and you mentioned this as well, yes, walls and walls of text. Walls and walls of text. Now, Jared Williams hasn't written a ton of comics, and it is a learning curve, but show don't tell. Show don't tell. And you have to build on what's come before. And so that's, those two things, that's where it's falling apart. You build on what comes before, you don't. And so if you're using the same characterization and the same personality for these characters that we've come to expect, you don't have to dump walls and walls of text on the page because we already kind of know who they are. But he's changing who these characters are at such a fundamental level that he's got no other out other than to just put up just thought bubble after, not thought bubble, but exposition box after exposition box over and over. It is kind of cool to see old Flash villains like, they call him Fiddles here, but clearly it's the Fiddler. Isaac Brown, they even refer to him as Isaac. But again, there's no content. It's funny, like walls and walls of text from Avery, walls and walls of text from Wallace. But when it comes to somebody who newer readers may not be that familiar with, I couldn't tell you the last time the Fiddler showed up in a Flash comic. It had to be like back during the original Wally West run that started in 1987. That yellow cover with the Jets on it or what have you. Sometime in that series, I'm pretty sure was the last time the Riddler showed up. So, or showed up in a Flash comic anyway. So there's going to be a ton of newer Flash readers that have no idea who this guy is, but you don't spend no time on any kind of background for the Fiddler, but we have walls of text about Avery mad because Wallace didn't call her when he said he would, but yet he had time to go get a haircut. Like, I don't know. It seems kind of trivial to me. Maybe it's authentic. Maybe maybe it's a little get off my lawn for us to sort of rant about this, because he clearly is a young writer, and based on the vernacular he's using, this is how kids talk these days, I guess. I mean, it's not how my 11-year-old daughter talks, but I don't know. Maybe this is how teenagers talk. I couldn't say, but yeah, this by far wasn't the worst issue of the series. I do feel like there's improvement, but it still has a long way to go in order to be an entertaining comic in my mind.
Agreed.
All right, let's move on. Up next, we have Red Hood the Hill. This is written by Sean Martinborough. Sanford Green is the artist. Matt Herms on colors. Troy Petrie on letters. I'm gonna say unfortunately, because I didn't really enjoy this that much, but it sort of is exactly what I expected it to be. I don't know the timing on it. I don't know why this is coming out so long after the Joker War, because it ties in so closely to the Joker War, which I did not enjoy at all. So the last thing I want to do is go back and read stories set in that time or right after that time. But that being said, I if you give me a good Jason Todd story, I'll probably still be on board. And this has the potential to be a good Jason Todd story. Where it falls down for me is there's so many other characters that I just couldn't care less about. It literally is not possible for me to care less about any of these other characters, whether they be the villains or this hero group that his family owns a diner in the hill. I don't care. I don't care. I've been given no reason to care. And when you add on to this, and I knew this was going to happen. I was told Sanford Green, or it was announced that Sanford Green was the artist. I'm just not a fan of his style. It's messy. It's muddy. It doesn't, in my mind, suit superhero stories at all. I don't know if he influences his color artist when he works with them. I've seen Matt Herms color things very brightly before. This is not colored that way. This is all brown and dreary and just adds to a feeling of kind of moroseness to the story. I just didn't enjoy this at all. Like, it was a chore to read. There were several times when I was reading it, I just wanted to stop. I just wanted to put it down and not read it. But I kept telling myself, well, maybe it'll get better. Maybe we'll get a little bit more. I mean, it says the name of the book, the name of the series is Red Hood the Hill. To say that Red Hood feels like a supporting character in this book is a vast understatement. It's more than a cameo, but he's got no agency at all. It's all these other supporting characters that, again, I don't care about. If you call the book The Hill and say it's about, XYZ characters that nobody's ever heard of before, probably it's not going to sell any at all, right? And so you understand why they call it Red Hood, but it's a little bit of a bait and switch in my mind, because this is not at least in this first issue, this is not a Red Hood story in the slightest. So I didn't like it. I'd go so far as to say that I enjoyed Speed Force more than I liked it. This for me was the worst comic of the week, and it's not a technically bad comic.
Woo!
It's just
That's harsh.
not. It's just not a Red Hood story, and it's not art that I enjoy. And I knew I wasn't going to like the art, but I was hoping that it would actually be a Red Hood story. But it's not. It's a story about these other characters that I couldn't possibly care less about. So I don't know. Rocky. What do you think? Am I being too harsh?
I I think you are definitely being too harsh on this. Only because I mean I agree that yeah, I agree with you in some respects, but I actually thought this was a well written story, and it's infinitely better than Speed Force, which by far is the not
Well,
only the worst.
in my defense, I said it's a technically well done comic,
Fair
and
enough.
I will not say that about Speed Force, but I just said I enjoyed it more.
Okay.
I got more enjoyment, even though there were technical issues, and there's a lot of issues technically with Speed Force. Don't get me wrong, but I just enjoyed it more. Speed Force didn't feel like a dreary comic, and this to me, both in story and art, feels like a dreary comic. So
Yeah. Well, I will say that this carried on because I think it was last week we got the Red Hood, the Hill one shot, which sort of branches into this. And you're right that one of the criticisms is that this really Red Hood is an afterthought in this comic. He doesn't he's not really needed. It's the story of Strike and Edge, and Strike is a superhero, is a street vigilante. Her real name is Dana Harlow. She's got a sister named Denise, who was a reporter in Gotham City in this area called the Hill. And Strike, as her in her alter ego of Strike, she makes a deal with a Captain Battle, who's a local cop, to turn the other way while she cleans up the streets during Joker War. So one of the reasons why the Hill is considered one of the safer parts of Gotham is because of the work that the Slayer has done in making a deal with one of the captains of one of the police. Unfortunately, the villain, the bad guy of the series, is this Slayer character who's working with this sort of like rap artist, this sort of like a Kanye West character by the name of Demetrius Carley Jr. And they want to sell all their running shoes and all their goods both legally and illegally, and they really want to control the Hill. And in doing so, they end up killing a pastor, and they really want to. They want to like spread their influence, and both in terms of online social media, but also controlling the streets and social media, and they seem to be doing a relatively successful job of it. But of course, uh, Strike is getting in the way, and Strike's sister Denise, who's a reporter, is also getting in the way with her reporting. Uh, Frankly, I thought Sean Martin Burrow's art. I agree with you that it is darker. It's dark. It's very moody. I will totally confess. I had to read this. It's only because I had extra time that I read this, because I was kind of turned off by initially reading it as well. I'm glad I read it. I think the story is worth it. I think it's good, but and if for no other reason that this is actually introducing us to new characters that could be interesting in the future. This this Strike character seems interesting. Her family seems interesting. Jason Todd is almost used as a potential love interest in there. I prefer Jason Todd as working with Artemis and Bizarro, but that's just me. I'm not everyone agrees with that, but that's my favorite Jason Todd sort of team up. But this I thought this wasn't bad. Is it my cup of tea? Not necessarily, but I do. I did enjoy it, and I thought it was well done by Martin Bureau, and I thought the art suited the mood and ambiance of the story. Although maybe not if you look at it from the point of view that the Hill is supposed to be a safer part of Gotham. That was the central conceit of the story, and yet it looked it felt almost as gloomier than Gotham, which it shouldn't have. So the art should have been a little bit more cleaner to better represent the sensibility of this story. But that's a minor criticism, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I hope when we get it starts to focus more on Jason Todd Red Hood moving forward, and maybe I can get on board. But yeah, I'm not interested in those other characters. I'm just not. Okay, up next we have Action Comics number 1062, written by Jason Aaron, art and cover, I guess, by John Timms, the way they have it listed. Colors are by Rex Locus, letters by Dave Sharp. Not a good time to be in Metropolis, as Bizarro sort of taken over. What do you think of this?
Uh, I kudos to Jason Aaron, man. I enjoyed this. I thought the whole issue was just. I mean, there's not a heck of a lot that happens in this issue other than just showing the full effect of the bizarro, the bizarroing of the world, in particular Metropolis, as everyone is turning into their opposite, and it became very clear that Superman himself is becoming the arch enemy of all the people of Metropolis, and it's very appropriate that Lois Lane, of course, who is the biggest supporter of Superman for obvious reasons, she becomes like the arch enemy of Superman. And Jason Aaron does a really good job here of just showing the plight. And the title of the issue is Live Bizarro or Die." And and even the cover saying, lit with Bizarro saying die, or pardon me, Bizarro saying live, meaning, of course, the opposite, die. I thought, I mean, again, a very simplistic idea of the opposite, but Jason Aaron has a lot of fun with it, and I mean, he does a really good job of conveying, frankly, particularly through the art of John Timms, just how terrifying that would be. That all of a sudden people are embracing the darker aspects, the opposite aspects of their characters and their actions, and it's creating absolute chaos. And unfortunately, I like how Jason Aaron is mindful, unlike many writers, mindful of the fact that Superman is part of the larger universe. So the Justice League's involved, or other characters are mentioned. Doctor Fate is involved, but he's unfortunately impacted by it. And so Mystic users are involved. Batman's involved, but only on the periphery because Jason Aaron knows that this is a Superman story. So he keeps it focused on Superman. And it becomes clear that Superman himself, while impacted and infected and slowly being overcome by the Bizarro virus or Bizarro effect, whatever you want to call it, he very clearly formulates a plan, and it's a desperate plan. And it's clear that despite the efforts of all the mystical users and the magic users on Earth, Bizarro is arguably the most powerful magical user in arguably the multiverse right now because of the effect of what he did in the first issue and in destroying all the magicians or the sorcerers on Gem World and elsewhere. Yeah, Bizarro is extremely powerful and seems to be occupying a part of Superman's mind, or at least that's what's implied. And the ending here, I just thought was inspired. And the reason I love the ending, and the ending here was Superman desperate. How do you stop the insanity of Bizarro World? Well, how do you impose sanity on an insane mind like Bizarro? Well, you go to the Joker, who's the opposite now. If the Joker is the most insane person on the planet, then if he's affected by the Bizarro effect, then obviously the Joker becomes the most sane man uh, in the DC universe. And the final page reveal where the Joker shows up and he's going to help Superman, navigate the psyche of his own psyche to overcome the Bizarro effect. I think it's just absolutely inspired. And the reason why I love it more is because this same week we got Batman 143, knowing the effect knowing that the Joker has the ability to create different psyches within himself. The fact it puts a new spin and it makes me think differently about the possibilities of a sane Joker. I mean, is it possible that the Joker could? I mean, again, this is not related, and there's no reason. I've not read anything. There's no reason to believe that Jason Aaron was even aware of Zardasky's run. They're not connected. This is his own story. But I like the convenient serendipitous overlap of the stories because it just put a bigger smile on my face when I saw this sane Joker looking so sophisticated, walking with the arrogance and the confidence of a Sherlock Holmes. He's going to help Superman in the final page revealer. I thought it was just inspired. It put a great big shit-eating grin on my face, and I really enjoyed this. And I'm normally a guy who's absolutely sick of the Joker, but I got to say this week, I'm seeing the Joker in these types of stories has really put a smile on my face. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, similar to how I felt, the second part of the story to how I felt about the second part of the Batman story that we got this week. As much as I'm not a big fan of the Joker, great to see the Joker here because it's a different take, right? It's something that's new and fresh. It's the Joker and he's sane, right? Like this idea of yeah, you said it, the most insane guy in the world. What's the opposite of that? Well, the most sane guy, like the most logical guy. So yeah, the fact that that Superman is going to get help from the Joker in order to defeat the Bizarro is amazing. I also mentioned Bizarro to me not a character I ever really enjoyed because it just doesn't work. Saying it's the exact opposite, right? He says hello when he arrives and or bye goodbye when he arrives and hello when he leaves or whatever. You can do little things like that, but it just doesn't work really well. But Jason Aaron is making it work. He's making it fun. I mean, Bizarro doesn't show up a heck of a lot in this actual. Excuse me. But we do get plenty of Superman, and we get Superman trying to fight off Bizarro, and Bizarro's in his head, sort of speaking to him at times and trying to break him down. But it was interesting early on when Metropolis got infected, and by the end of the issue, the whole, like Rocky said, the whole world's infected. The rest of the Justice League tried to contain it, like he mentioned, and it eventually broke out and got everywhere. But early on, it's Metropolis is sort of ground zero for this infection, and Lois is infected, and seeing her burn books, which again, exact opposite of Lois, but it was hard to see. It was hard. There's an argument that can be made that I like Lois more than Superman himself as a character, but anyway, yeah, with Lois and Superman being infected first, and then spreading out from there in a way, and then seeing sort of the catastrophe that unfolds for the city that Superman just loves. There's a tragedy there, But what made the tragedy worse is the fact that in some way, somehow, we don't know how at this point, Superman's able to fight off the spell. He's able, you'd expect more from Batman, right? With the willpower, or Hal Jordan with the willpower to be able to fight off the spell. And I only say that, and not that I don't think Superman is very strong-willed, but it's magic. It's one of his weaknesses. So to see him fight that off, but still being infected by Bizarro in some way, is really interesting to me. Obviously, we're going to see more, probably more fallout from that as well. And then right at the end, when he flies away, when Superman kind of thinks about it, okay, who can help me defeat Bizarro? Oh, the most sane guy in the world, Joker. Bizarro Joker, I guess you'd say. And he flies away. And there's a part of Lois that's glad to see him leaving, but then there's a part of her that thinks, Clark? Wait, so is she able, is it the love that they have for each other? Is that how they're able to fight off the magic spell? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But brilliantly inspired. Like, as much as the first issue just didn't work that well for me, one of the things that I thought was brilliant that Jason Aaron did was to have Bizarro as a magic wielder. And we talked about it at the time, like, well, of course he'd be a very powerful magic user. If Superman is very vulnerable to magic and Bizarro's the opposite of Superman, it stands to reason, right? Like, brilliant. That's just brilliant reasoning from Jason Aaron. I can't wait to ask him about that. So, yeah, really, I feel really good about where we are with the Superman titles. Joshua Williamson's been doing a fantastic job. We've gone from a fantastic PKJ run to now. I was a little worried about Jason Aaron on the title, and then that first issue, it was only okay for me. But man, he knocked the second issue out of the park. So feeling really good about where we are with Action Comics this year.
Agreed.
Okay. Last comic we're going to talk about in detail, Green Lantern #8 from writer Jeremy Adams. Art is by Amin K. Nahalapin. Colors by Romulo Fajardo Jr. Letters by Dave Sharp. And then there's a backup as well that actually stars Kyle Rayner, and it's written by somebody who's pretty familiar with Kyle Rayner. Ron Mars jumps on and writes the Kyle Rayner story. Joe Mullen shows up in it as well, and it looks like it's going to lead into some other aspects of Green Lantern, sort of the cosmic part of it, and we'll talk about it in a minute. But Dale Eaglesham handles the art on the backup. Alex Guaramis is on colors, and Dave Sharp's on letters. But let's talk about the main story first, Rocky. We have a Blue Lantern that we know showed up last issue and was asking Hal, like, what are you doing stuck on Earth? The Green Lantern Corps really needs your help. And he explains what happened on Odom and how somebody, they're not sure who, showed up on Odin, which is basically the homeworld of the Blue Lanterns, and destroyed the Blue Lantern battery. And he's also heard rumors that somebody went to Korrigar and destroyed the Yellow Lantern battery, and somebody went, I can't remember the name of the planet that the Red Lanterns, Isamalt, went to Isamalt and destroyed the Red Lantern. So he's like, you got to get off the planet. You got to get out there and find out who's doing this or what have you. And Hal's like, I can't. I've tried. And he's like, really? Have you really tried? And I don't remember seeing this Blue Lantern before. Razor is his name. He may be a new character. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe he showed up in the Jeff Johns run as more of a minor character, or maybe I just don't remember him. I honestly don't know. It's been so long since I've read Blackest Night or what have you. But he is kind of arrogant, and he is, kind of self-assured, and he tells Jordan he's not trying hard enough. So Hal, he gives it his best. He gives it his best and tries multiple times to escape, and he's not able to. And he decides to go to Madame Xanadu for help. So a lot of magic stuff going on in the DCU these days. And Xanadu definitely senses something. And as she's trying to relay what's going on and tells Hal where he needs to go to investigate, these three other, I guess they're lanterns, show up. But they also seem like they're members or maybe council members of the United Planets. So this goes back to something that we talked about before, where I've talked about this idea of the United Planets and how they seem almost malevolent here as they're starting out, which I don't I don't really care for. I just like the think of the United Planets as sort of a neutral bureaucratic organization. You don't think of them anymore as evil than you would like the DMV. Yeah, they're a pain in the ass and you hate dealing with them, but it's just bureaucracy. But these guys clearly have something else going on. And what's interesting is, they show up, they're there to get Razor because he was not supposed to leave Odim. But they see that Hal Jordan has a ring and they're like, wait, what are you doing with the ring? You're not supposed to have a ring. You're supposed to be quarantined here. What's going on? That's not even one of our rings. It doesn't communicate. Clearly it's something different. But in their course of trying to apprehend Odim and Hal Jordan, they actually change. They change their emotional spectrum, which is not supposed to be possible. Although we have seen one character, I think it was in the Robert Venditti run, that could change, or it might have been in Sam Humphries' Green Lanterns run. But anyway, these guys are able to wield different emotional spectrums all off the same ring. They change to yellow, they change to blue in the middle of the fight, and they are able to grab Razor and fly off. But they leave Hal behind only because they're worried that they won't be able to escape Earth. And they're like, well, we weren't here for Hal anyway. We'll deal with him later. And they fly off with Razor. And then Hal goes to the spot Monte de Santa Negria Guarda, Galicia. I think it's somewhere in Spain, where Madame Xanadu told him to go, where he might find answers to what may be holding him back and keeping him from leaving Earth with this unique ring that he has. So a lot happening in the issue, a lot of action. The art by Nahilapan is fantastic. We know that the editorial mandate to Jeremy Adams was, you got to keep Green Lantern on Earth. It's interesting, right? He's still going to tell a cosmic story, though. If he's stuck on Earth, he'll just come up with reasons why Hal's stuck on Earth. The reason is not so dissimilar from why Silver Surfer was stuck on Earth for decades over at Marvel before he finally figured it out, which was brilliantly done back in the day. But yeah, Hal Jordan's stuck on Earth. They'll just bring the cosmic to him. We got a Blue Lantern showing up. We got these Guardian Lanterns showing up. Sinestro was there on Earth, so it definitely feels like it's building towards something big. And I think Jeremy's mentioned, or maybe it was Philip Kennedy Johnson, that their books are sort of on a collision course. Look for a Green Lantern event coming up toward the end of the year, or maybe early next year, is my guess. I don't know anything for sure, but that's my guess. So anyway, what do you think of this issue of Green Lantern, Rocky?
Well, something is happening with the emotional spectrum because, as you said, all the batteries of all the various batteries, Red Lantern, Blue Lantern, et cetera, they've all been apparently destroyed. This United Planets, this set of 3 Green Lanterns of the United Planet Lanterns appear to be having the ability of multiple spectrums of be able to. We know in this issue they've accessed willpower, fear, and hope. Now, do they have the power of the Red Lantern? Do they have the power of greed? Do they have the avarice? Do they have these other powers as well? Do they have the power of the Star Sapphires? We don't know, but we do know that Carol Ferris in this issue has a conversation with Hal. She almost seems to confess her feelings for him. She doesn't want Hal to leave, but Hal needs to leave. So there's Jeremy Adams does a good job of building tension there. You mentioned how maybe it's an editorial mandate that you got to keep Hal Jordan on Earth. Good. I'm liking this because I like the fact that the universe is going to shit while Hal Jordan's strapped on Earth. That builds the tensions, that raises the stakes. I like the fact that, as you said, PKJ hinted at the fact that both him and Jeremy Adams their storylines will be converging in some respects. I love the idea, man. If we get the Revenant Queen with her wonky powers and John Stewart's unique kind of ring and his unique kind of power set, and you throw that in with an emotional spectrum gone awry, and with Hal Jordan when he ultimately does leave Earth, then inevitably confronting Sinestro again. And I don't care what anybody says, Sinestro's got to be upset with the United Planets controlling the Sinestro battery. I mean, this has all the makings. This could be. I mean, really, this sounds epic. This sounds really cool. Now, I almost don't want to get my hopes up too high because it sounds like something that is really building to something really cool and just plain awesome. And it's just the fanboy in me I'm just geeking out from this, just from the potential of this. And 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 again, I'm a little bit frustrated on the one hand that Hell's sort of restricted to Earth, and now he ends up in Spain because Madame Xanadu says go to Spain because when he was battling Sinestro at one point, he felt a power surge in that area of the world near Spain, and maybe something there can help him get off planet. So, but if Jeremy Adams, if he is mandated to sort of keep Hal on Earth, that can be frustrating in the hands of a shitty writer because it feels like it's decompressed and it's dragging it out. But I feel that we're getting character moments here, we're getting revelations here, we're getting cool moments here. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying what's happening with John Stewart Green Lantern, and to top it off, I'm also enjoying to see Kyle Rayner in the backup, which we can talk about now. So, what do you think of the backup? You're on mute there, my friend.
Yeah, I'm so bad at that today. One more thing about the main story, like this has such a different feel than his Flash run. Like his Flash run felt all ages and it felt family friendly and so interesting. And this feels like so, like you said, epic and super heroic and what have you. Like, man, Jeremy is just a super talented writer. He continue to feel like he doesn't get enough credit for what he does. So, yeah, as far as the backup goes, I mean, great to see Kyle Rayner, and nobody gets his voice down better than what Ron Mars does. But it's all sort of set up, right? Like Kyle clearly knows there's something going on, or he senses there's something going on. Something's not right with the United Planet. Something is not right with the Green Lantern Corps. He can't get a hold of Hal. He doesn't agree with that Hal's stranded on Earth. He doesn't think that's right. Um, but really interesting to go all the way back to his earliest, even before he had the lantern ring at all, and his girlfriend Alex, who you could argue that without Alex there'd be no Gail Simone comic book creator, because Alex was a character that was seemingly created by Ron Mars and Daryl Banks. Daryl Banks, who was recently on the podcast to talk about his current Kickstarter campaign, but created and then killed and stuffed in a refrigerator by, I think it was Major Disaster, as sort of a
Major
plot
Force.
device.
Major Force.
Major Force. There you go. Major Force. Sort of as a plot device to give agency to Kyle Rayner and have him, have a reason to get out there and be all he could be, as it were. So, yeah, interesting to see that when Kyle needs somebody to talk to, he's using the willpower of the green spectrum to recreate Alex and say, I still miss you, all these years later. So, yeah, really fantastic from Ron Mars, and great art and hints of things to come. Hints of things to come. Clearly, this is a bigger story, as we mentioned. So, yeah, what do you think of it?
I thought it was actually a beautiful, beautiful, wonderful choice by Ron Mars to have the character of Alex DeWitt. That's her full name. And I want to say her full name because I know she's a fictional character and we're just reviewing a comic book. But for those of us who are familiar and who lived through that period of time, that the whole concept of women in refrigerators, the controversy it caused, and it's still with us today. The expression when you fridge a character, that's when you fridge a character to create drama and to create motivation for another character to do something. So usually it's women who are fridged or killed off in order to motivate a male character in the traditional sense. And whether or not you believe that or not, that's an agenda in some stories or not, is besides the point. What I like what Ron Mars does here by using Alex is that he's saying that, look, even if it was fridging back in the day, and that's what Gail Simone called it in an article before she became more famous as a writer, the fact that having Kyle Rayner remember her, and in his moments when he's by himself and he's feeling lonely and he's maybe upset and he needs to express himself. The fact that he thinks of her and he's never forgotten her, I think that redeems the controversy a little bit. In my mind, it's saying, look, this character does care about Alex DeWitt. She wasn't just a random victim stuffed in a refrigerator. She was more than that. She was somebody who this character hasn't forgotten. And I think that's very important. I thought that was wonderful that Ron Mars did that. And then to top it off with a new character, Sojourner, show up. Very clearly, she knows that it's a private moment that he's having. I thought that really hit it home. And in particular, I just want to point out something that John Stewart in his series, PKJ gave John Stewart the ability to essentially almost create an extra kind of sentient life for his like his mother, giving embodying a new essence or life force for his mother, uh, in creating his recreating a construct of his dead sister, baby sister. And it sort of makes me wonder, is are we going to be seeing Alex again, and is there going to be some sentience to Alex? Is she ever going to speak to him, or is she just there as an image in Kyle Rayner's mind? Will we see more of this construct or an AI version of Alex moving forward? It's interesting to see. That's just me speculating. Maybe it isn't. Maybe this is a one-time occurrence, but I really thought that was great, and it's great to see Kyle Rayner again. And like, full disclosure, I really got into Green Lantern. Kyle Rayner was my favorite Green Lantern, because there were, people got to remember back in the day, it wasn't for Kyle Rayner saved the entire Green Lantern Corps. He's the torchbearer for a reason. There was a period of time where there was only one Green Lantern, and that was Kyle, and it all flowed from him after that. So it was, I really love this. I really love this issue. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, Kyle is beloved. Like the way Wally is. Wally just he was the Flash for a lot of people. For 2 decades. Kyle not quite as long, but yeah, he definitely for a lot of people is the Green Lantern. I'm sort of partial to Hal Jordan because that was my first Green Lantern. But I mean, I love Kyle as well. I could give me Kyle and give me Hal, and you can have the like. I don't care. Like John Stewart, don't care. Guy Gardner, don't care. I don't mind Simon Boz and Jessica Cruz, but yeah, there's plenty that I could lose, and I wouldn't miss them. But anyway, that does it for the books that we're going to talk about in detail. There's also a Spanish version of Blue Beetle out this week, as there typically is when that title drops. Also, in terms of collections this week, we've got Detective Comics Volume 2, Gotham Nocturne hardcover. This is collecting the Rom V series. Specifically, this series, well, actually, it doesn't even say which issues it collects. So anyway, check that out if you're so inclined. It does look like it's 10 issues, 100 pages, so probably quite large. Other collections out this week: Night Terrors Dark Nightmares hardcover. Again, we weren't big fans of the Night Terrors event, so buy that at your own risk. We also have Batman and Robin by Tomasi and Gleason, Book 1 trade paperback. This collects the Batman and Robin New 52 series, Volume 1, issues 20 through 22, and the second volume of Batman and Robin, issues numbers 0 through 14. And then we've got Batman The Adventure Continues Season 3 trade paperback, which collects the Batman's comic book stories that are based on the Batman the Animated Series. And this collects issues 1 through 8 of Season 3. So that does it for the collections that are out this week. I guess it's time for Book of the Week. Rocky, you have anything that stands out?
Yeah, this is a little bit challenging this week. I'm going to. Uh, hmm, I really enjoyed. Okay, I'm thinking in real time here. I really enjoyed Green Lantern. I was pleasantly surprised with Sinister Sons and Batman: The Madness. I really liked the ending on that. But I'm gonna have to. And Batman 143 was so good in Action Comics with the Joker. But I chose Batman last week as my book of the week with Sardasky, so I'm gonna go with Jason Aaron because I really like what he's doing with Superman, and I want to give him props. So I would have to go with I'm gonna go with Action Comics, and I'll just bring it up here. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Action Comics for my pick of the week. What about you?
Yeah, it's kind of tougher than I thought it would be initially. You mentioned Sinister Sons. That's off to a great start. I really enjoyed Outsiders. This new Jenny Crisis is a really interesting character with a lot of potential. Wesley Dodds Sandman continues to be really good. Action Comics, like you mentioned, worthy. But I'm gonna go with my boy Jeremy Adams and Green Lantern #8, just based on the fact, and you kind of mentioned it, based on the fact that yeah, editorial, like, okay, you got to keep him on Earth, and Jeremy's like, all right, fine. In the hands of a lesser writer, that might be, that might not work as well. But for Jeremy, it might be a challenge, but he's going to figure out a way to tell the story he wants to tell. And when it comes to a Green Lantern story, that's a cosmic story. And this feels big in scope. It feels epic. It feels cosmic. And Hal hasn't even been able to leave Earth yet. So that's fantastic. I'm really curious to see what's going to happen next. He's doing a fantastic job. I want to give him props. Plus, the art is gorgeous. The color work's fantastic. If I have any nitpick, it's relatively fast paced, and knowing Jeremy, he's trying to squeeze every bit of story he can in there. And I don't know, it's just one of those things. It's so good. I want more. Like, I wish I had 3 or 4 more pages per month of that title to flesh out the story more. But that's just me being greedy. So anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Hope you're checking out our daily spawn over on the Comic Source YouTube channel or the Comic Source audio only channel. We're continuing with that. We just, interviewed Todd McFarlane himself a few weeks ago. It was great to hear Todd. He came on and talked about all the upcoming plans for Spawn this year. Issue 350 is coming. Also, the first of the new series that were announced at New York Comic Con last year that are set in the Spawn universe, Rat City, is going to be coming out real soon. I think final order cutoff is March 18th, and the book is supposed to drop April 10th. We had a chance to talk to Erica Schultz, who's the writer for that series. It sounds so good. She's so excited to talk about it. So look for that interview that's coming up soon. I mentioned we spoke to Daryl Banks along with his co-writer for the project that's going on called Horror Show over at Kickstarter, which is a really, really fantastic story. I got a chance to read it, and I won't spoil it, but if you go and look at the cover, if you're familiar with movies from the early 80s, you probably know what movie it kind of homages in, or some of the characters kind of homage in a certain way. So that's written by Michael Katz, and it's a really fun story. Go check out that interview. And yeah, I think that's it. I have some other interviews coming up soon, but those are the ones that'll be out this week. So appreciate the support as always. Don't forget to head over, if you're listening to us audio only, make sure you head over to Rocky's YouTube channel, Comic Space Boom ! Comment on this video. Let us know what books you like this week. Let us know you agree, disagree with things we had to say. We love to engage with people in the comment section. Be sure you like and subscribe the video and ring that notification bell so you know when new content drops from Rocky. Any plans for any episodes coming up, Rocky, other than our regular DC Spotlight? I know you've been pretty busy lately, so.
Yeah, well, I still want to do. I still probably might do a quick review of Black Panther #1, maybe with or without you. Maybe I also want to be. I'm going to be reviewing Infernals #1, which is an Image title that came out this week that I really quite like. It deals with the son of the devil, and his the son of the devil is dying, and he has to put Armageddon on hold, and so the son of the devil has offspring that he has to recruit, but he doesn't like his offspring, but he's dying of cancer, and Armageddon's on hold, and it's actually an interesting premise, and so I thought I'll review it. So,
is that Rick Remender?
No, I don't believe it is. It's
Ed Brubaker. It's one of those guys.
No, I have. It just came. It's Image this week. It's new writers to me. I think Infernals. Good.
I thought there was one that was coming out that sounds similar to similar in title. I don't know that I know what the premise is, but I thought it was coming out by somebody that I'd heard of before. Okay, Inferno. It's Ryan Parrott. That's who it is. Yeah, so writer on Rogue Sun, did Mighty Morphin Power Rangers for a long time, did Dead Day at Aftershock. Yeah, I know Ryan. He's been on the show several times. So yeah, I definitely should check that out as well. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. We appreciate the support as always. Don't forget to head over and subscribe, as I mentioned. And I guess that's going to do it. So thanks for the support, and we'll talk to you next time.
See you later.